YouTube, what's going on, baby? It's your boy BZ, and we are back with a banger. Today, I'm gonna be showing you the best controller and graphic settings that you need for Modern Warfare 3 so that you can go out and dominate every single game. If it is your first time here on the channel and you like Call of Duty and Warzone content, whether it be tips and tricks or cool videos, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you've been to this channel before and you've seen any of my other videos, make sure to leave a comment down below with what your favorite part of the video was and what type of content that you like to see in the future so I can provide that for you. All right, so we are going to be starting off with the controller settings that you need for Modern Warfare multiplayer. So obviously, this is going to be for controller. I do not personally play on mouse and keyboard, so I will not be giving you guys any advice on that. I suck on mouse and keyboard. The button layout for me is always going to be on default. I don't really see any reason to change that. The controls for Call of Duty have always been standard for, I want to say, like the past decade. So if you're an experienced player, or even if you're a new player coming to Call of Duty, playing on default isn't really going to hurt you. I know that some people do not have paddles, so I do have a modded controller. I have an Xbox Elite Series 2, and I do have paddles in the back that allow me to have certain button configurations. There are other types of play styles like claw and bumper jumper tactical. For now, most people are just going to be playing on default, and default is what I've been using, especially because I have paddles. Please, for the love of God, take off controller vibration. I do not know a single person, competitively at least, that still plays with controller vibration. If you do play with controller vibration, I understand that it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. The only reason is because when you first shoot your gun, you're going to notice that you're going to be adjusting for recoil on your controller, not the weapon in the game that isn't going to be there. That's where the adjustment is going to come in. But typically when you're playing first person shooters, you are fighting the recoil and your controller more than you are other opponents. Now, in addition to turning off controller vibration, there's another cool feature that I've seen for a while now. I don't know a lot of players that utilize this, but if this is something, if this is an adjustment, excuse me, that you can make, I think this could actually be game changing for a lot of players who don't have access to paddles, who aren't comfortable playing claw, but still want to have that variety in gameplay from maybe even like a different button layout, right? If you want to flip your LB and your LB LT and your RB, your right bumper and right trigger, this alone would allow you to use this RB right here. If you're on an Xbox controller, I know it's different if you're on PlayStation, but the controllers are essentially the same thing, right? Now, trigger stops are something that I have on my modded controller. When I click this little trigger stop right here and I put it all the way down to the bottom, that means I barely have to tap my right trigger for me to shoot my gun. Now, when you're playing games like Call of Duty, where literally every single bullet, every single millisecond matters, this is going to give you a huge advantage. Now, this feature right here that we're talking about, flipping your left bumper, left trigger, right bumper, right trigger, if you turn that on, you will now shoot with your right bumper, throw grenades with your right trigger, aim with your left bumper, and throw your tactical with your left trigger. This would give you the opportunity that I have to shave off a couple of milliseconds, especially in those close range gunfights. I think that is a huge game changer for anybody that can accommodate that. If you don't have access to a modded controller, or if you're not comfortable playing claw, I think that would be absolutely huge. Now, this is another game-changing feature that they added to Modern Warfare 3. They didn't have this in any other Call of Duty, and I'm very, very glad that they added it. It's an amazing feature with the Deadzone inputs where you can essentially test your Deadzone to see whether or not there is either like maybe a mechanical defect or some wear and tear into your controller, right? And this is exactly how it works. So I'm going to use the left stick min for an example. You can test your stick Deadzone by, if I turn this on and I grab my controller, I can now move my left stick or my right stick a little bit, and you'll see exactly how much your controller is moving. Now, Deadzone alone is basically how much you have to move your joystick for the input to be registered in the actual game. So if I turn my Deadzone all the way down, you can see that I'm not even touching my controller, and the horizontal and vertical axis already have different values than they did previously. You really want them to be at 0-0 whenever I'm stationary. But I barely touched my controller right there, and you can already tell that there's a little bit of movement with my joystick, and that input would be registered into the game. I would already be moving forward, backward, left, and right. You do not want that. If you don't adjust your dead zones accordingly, you are going to end up making accidental mistakes that you won't even recognize that you made. So do yourself a favor, take 5 minutes before you're playing any game, before you even load up to your first multiplayer games, go to your dead zones, figure out exactly what works for you, where your controller values need to lie. Mine typically lies at, honestly, I haven't really had to change my dead zones much. I will say for Modern Warfare 2, I did have to adjust my left stick only because the movement in that game was so slow. I felt like I needed something that was a little bit more responsive, even if it was at the cost of making a few mistakes here and there. Now, I have this argument with my friends a lot of the time. Typically, when I'm playing, I need a sensitivity that's a lot higher than what the average player or even what pros use. I think most pros use a controller sensitivity between 6 to 8, and for me, that just doesn't work. I get very frustrated if I can't snap, move, turn left to right as quick as possible. I used to play on 2020, and if some of you guys play on 2020 now, I think that's great. Good for you. It's more so your personal preference. I am going to always advocate for someone to use a higher sensitivity. I think it's easier to do that and then lower your zoom sensitivity. So if you go down here, you're going to see your custom sensitivity per zoom and adjust these per value. I think if you have iron sights, 2 to 3 scope, 4 or 5 scope, and so on and so forth, especially for Warzone, that's going to matter a lot, and you can adjust those accordingly based on how fast you want your aim to be from target to target. I haven't really felt any loss of aim assist. I think I've just gotten used to it at this point. I will say though, the only drawback is that from distance, I typically overshoot my aim if I'm trying to snap onto a target, but that for me is worth the drawback of not being able to snap on people who are behind me. Typically, most of your fights are going to be in front of you anyway, but that's all personal preference, so I'll let you guys decide whatever you want for that. My stick sensitivity will stay at 15. Now, tactical stance is a relatively new feature. I know we get to try it out in the beta a little bit. A lot of people have had mixed reviews, but for that sensitivity, I wouldn't suggest changing it. Tactical stance is something that you're only going to be using when you're sliding and aiming at the same time. Very rarely, or if you're doing like a camo challenge, but very rarely do I see people actually utilizing tactical stance. If that's something that you want to do, you're gonna have to adjust that yourself because it is a new feature. I don't think anybody, as of right now, as it stands, is going to be able to tell you what the perfect setting is. Personally, for me, I would say leave it at a 1.0. That would match the sensitivity that you have above. So if you're at 15:15, it's going to feel like you're at 15:15 and it won't change anything different. So aim response curve is very unique feature. I know a lot of people have talked about this before, so I'm going to give you guys a quick run through. Aim response curve is just the way that your aiming sensitivity responds to your joystick or mouse input. There's going to be 3 of those features, which are going to be standard, dynamic, and linear. The standard aim response curve provides a linear sensitivity to your response and your input. This means the speed at which your crosshair moves is directly proportional to the movement of your joystick. So just how I kind of touched on the tactical stance multiplier, how it feels very smooth in comparison to what your regular ADS, your regular horizontal and vertical stick sensitivity is going to be. It's essentially going to work the exact same way when it comes to standard. Standard is essentially going to match that acceleration when you're aiming from one target to another. Now, dynamic is exactly what I use. Dynamic is a response curve that offers a more aggressive acceleration at the higher end of the sensitivity scale. So for me, if I'm aiming down the center of my sights and I see somebody at the corner of my screen, the acceleration and the precision that it takes for me to aim from the center to that individual in the corner, it could be in the top right, top left, or bottom left, doesn't matter, is going to be accelerated. And for me, that gives me a very good aggressive play style. I don't know anybody that uses linear. I actually don't know much about it, so it's probably not one that I'm going to touch on, but dynamic is exactly what I use. If you're an aggressive player, I would suggest getting used to dynamic. I think it's great. I'm pretty happy with it. ADS sensitivity transition, please make this instant. Right now, we just touched on this earlier. If you want to have a high sensitivity and adjust your sensitivity for each zoom, so low zoom to 2 to 3 scope, 4 to 5, and so on and so forth, you can adjust each of those, but there's going to be a difference in the speed at which you aim from left to right when you are ADS'd and when you are not ADS'd. Now, you want that transition to be instant. So if I stop aiming and I need to turn to my left because there's somebody behind me, or if I need to turn to my right and switch out to my SMG, you want your sensitivity to change instantly. So you already have, you don't want it to be gradual. If you feel like it's going to be gradual, or if you need it to be gradual, it's going to be way too slow for you to react. I suggest putting it on instant just so you don't have that issue. Instant is exactly where a lot of my friends, a lot of the competitive players that I know, they use it on. Target aim assist. I mean, if you don't play with aim assist, I don't know what to tell you, bro. You're just the greatest. But aim assist default is pretty much fine. I haven't tried out Black Ops. However, I do know that Black Ops was broken at the launch of Modern Warfare 2, so Black Ops is probably something I'm going to be testing out pretty soon. Now, I won't need to go into depth with a lot of the gameplay settings for your controller. These are going to be very consistent to what we had in the past. If you are new, do me a favor, just copy down the settings that I have. This is going to save you a lot of time down the road. This is going to be all the settings that literally every single pro that I know uses. So with that being said, automatic tack sprint, you always want to have that on. However, you do not want auto move forward on. Auto move forward means that you're not going to have to touch your left joystick at all, and you will always be consistently moving forward. That's a very big nuisance. Make sure you turn that off. Single tap sprint, ground mantle, you always want this off too. You don't want to walk towards any obstacle and automatically mantle it, especially if you want to snake it or if you want to use cover. Just make sure you turn that off. It's gonna be very irritating. Automatic airborne mantle also kind of goes hand in hand with grounded mantle. Make sure that's on partial. Automatic ground mantle hang, make sure you turn that off. Slide and dive behavior, make sure that you only use slide. There's no reason for you to have dive on only or dive only, or even to have slide at all. Just make sure that you have slide only. You're not going to be diving, especially in multiplayer. That's a mechanic that's really only useful for Warzone. Plunging underwater, make sure that you have that as trigger. That's going to allow you to still, if you're underwater and you want to go further down, like to hide from either enemies that are above, you can use trigger to do that while still looking up. If you don't, you have to use free, which means that you have to aim down into the water to go down. That's going to kind of limit your visibility. I prefer to have it on trigger as opposed to free look. Parachute auto deploy, you're not really going to need to worry about that until Warzone, but even still have it off. Mantle only, yes, please, you do not like that ledge climb behavior. You don't want to be stuck on a ledge looking like you're doing pull-ups while you're getting shot at by some Timmy behind you. Combat aim down sights behavior, all this again is going to be very standard. We've had the same settings essentially for the past 2 years. All of your armor plate behaviors and things of that nature are only going to be useful for Warzone. The only difference is for tactical stance. I don't use tactical stance that often. I'm assuming you're probably not going to unless you use the canted laser. In that case, you have to use whatever is comfortable for you. I wouldn't say double tap ADS, however. Sometimes you're ADSing like down a sight and you don't necessarily mean to switch to tac stance, so you just want to make sure that you have that on the ADS button too. I think it's very helpful. The only other setting that I would say is important to change here is to make sure that you have depleted ammo weapon switch off. You never want to be in a situation where you're running away from an enemy and your gun is out of ammo and you need to go to a place where you can hide and reload for a second, but you're still running. So if you stop running for a second and you have this turned on, your gun is going to automatically reload. And that's going to put you in a situation where you might slow down from trying to run away from the enemy again. If you turn a corner, if you slide cancel for a second and you stop, you're automatically reloading. You would rather have more control over your reload and your movement behavior, and this gives you that. So now, before I forget, one of the most important controller changes that you need to make is going to be towards interact/reload behavior. You need to make sure that you're on prioritize reload if you're playing multiplayer. 9 times out of 10, if you have a bunch of loot in front of you, you're not really picking up the guns off of the ground, especially if you're camo grinding or playing in a multiplayer game. You're really going to be reloading your gun, and that's going to be most important. If you have a lot of loot in front of you and you just need to reload your gun, maybe you're hiding in a corner to regain for a second, it's going to be very frustrating if you're on prioritize interact. Make sure that you change this to prioritize reload. I was playing Warzone and I'm still going to be playing a couple of games of Warzone ranked soon, so I'm going to keep it on prioritize interact because again, there's some slight differences. Now, if you're going to be on armor plate behavior, if you're playing Warzone, make sure that you have this on apply all. If you have 3 more armor plates and you want to apply all those armor plates, I don't think I've ever seen anybody that just wants to apply 1. Even if you do just want to apply 1, it's easier to cancel that and just have the default be apply all, especially if you're running away from somebody, rather than to have it the other way around. I think it's very frustrating. Make sure that this is on apply all. Now, that's all I have for you guys today, but if it's your first time here, again, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And if you are a returning viewer, make sure that you guys like the video, drop a comment for the algorithm, and much love, peace, and blessings. Thank you.